everyone. Uh, the topic of my presentation today is from experience to expression, personalized communication and storytelling in TED Talks. Before I begin to speak on the structure of a TED Talk and what actually goes into making that kind of a talk, it is good to know the importance of communication. So, Harvard Business School, a very reputed school as we know, conducted a survey, uh, and the topic of the survey was communicating for impact. And basically, the survey highlighted the importance of communication as understood by organizational
Sorry to
leaders.
interrupt you, ma'am. Soumya, ma'am.
Yes,
Can you make this presentation full screen mode?
yes, sure.
Yes.
Yes. Uh, so, the survey highlighted the importance of communication as it was understood by organizational leaders or, managers who were had teams of people working under them, or even academicians, independent research scholars. And the results overwhelmingly stated that most leaders and academicians stressed on the importance of communication, and they stressed on the fact that by and large people should have some kind of training in soft skills and communication, not just for the purpose of sort of developing harmony in talk, but also for developing leadership in organizational roles. Now, the normal way in which we understand communication is that it is it is a two-way process where there is a sender and a receiver, and the sender sends the message and the receiver decodes it. That was a model that was given by Shannon and Weaver in 1998. And over the years, the process of communication has become much more refined, with scholars understanding that actually it is a multi-way process, in the sense that when the sender sends the message and the receiver receives it, what actually happens is that the receiver might interpret it in their own ways, and they might respond in a way which the sender might agree with or might not agree with. And according to that, the sender, that is the speaker, adjusts their response. So actually, we not only have a sender and a receiver, we have messages, information that is shared, and responses that are given by people. And the same person can act as a sender and a receiver. That is why we say communication is a multi-way process. And if we look at the, speeches given by students, let's say, as part of inter-school competitions, or as part of debates, or even something like a TED talk, okay, there is a lot of verbal and non-verbal communication from multiple channels that is happening when the talk is actually going on. So we say communication in linguistics is a sort of an art that involves both verbal communication and non-verbal communication. So the focus is that it involves not just language, but also extra linguistic aspects. Something which is known as body language, how we communicate through our gestures, our facial expressions, you know, our kinetic movement, and things like that. And to actually appreciate and understand the role of language in, let's say, a speech or a talk, we need to understand that language is a very, very powerful tool. So much so that a linguist known as Bollinger actually called it a loaded weapon. And recent theorists like Fairclough or Van Dijk and all actually state that language creates our reality in terms of the fact that the kind of language we learn, the kind of language we speak, the kind of language we encounter other people speaking, that sort of creates our uh, language, thought, and culture are interrelated. And there is a very famous hypothesis which known as the Wolff-Sophia hypothesis that sort of explains this. A very simple example can, uh, highlight this point. Uh, if we look at the climate in our own country, we have extremes of cold weather and hot weather, but we do not have snow like, let's say, the Eskimos. And for people who live, beyond, let's say, in northern parts, uh, beyond USA, beyond Canada, right? Uh, Largely, there is a lot of snow, and the snow is of different types. So Eskimos obviously have many words for snow in comparison to us, because we live in a tropical climate. So we will have many words, let's say, for hot weather, for heat, or for monsoon, right? So the point is that linguists say that the way we think, the kind of culture we are part of, determines the kind of language we speak. And this has relevance to the kind of speeches that people give. And I will explain that in connection with when I'm talking about, TED speeches. Uh, largely, we say that language becomes relevant. Why? Because language is not just a tool for communicating information. Uh, Language actually becomes a medium for a smooth flow of conversation. For example, when we meet somebody and we greet them, we are not really, and we say that, it's going to rain today. We are not really giving information. Sometimes, yes, through language or through the medium of language, we give information. But sometimes we're just exchanging pleasantries. We're just talking, engaging in small talk or talking about weather. So, language can be used for multiple purposes. One of the purposes of language use is what is known as rhetorical communication, or what is known as rhetoric in communication, where we use language specifically for public speaking to persuade the audience. And in the case of TED Talks, uh, we are not just persuading the audience, but we are also sharing inspirational ideas, sort of better their lives, that can also sort of better their goals. So when we talk about rhetoric and communication, we actually talk about three specific levels. And there are strategies at every level that go into making a very good public speaker, or that go into making, a very good public speech. So the first level is the ideational level, the level of ideas. Then we have the linguistic level, when we actually use language for communicating specific information or for stressing particular points. And the third is the psychological level, where we focus not just on the language, but we are actually focusing on audience psychology. Who our target audience is, trying to read the pulse of the audience, trying to figure out what they want, right? And how to put it in a way that it appears palatable and accessible to them. So all these three levels feed into each other. It is a kind of loop. It is not a one-way process. Ideas, language, and psychology feed into each other. So the way I am going to go about this talk is I am going to discuss or share with you all some strategies and some aspects at every level that we need to keep in mind when we are training students to become TEDx speakers, training students to, participate in debates, participate in other kinds of competitions that require public speaking. Because after all, aspects from each of these levels, become indirectly important for speaking on stage. So the first level is the level of ideation, that is the level of ideas. And we say that, at this level, this is not the level where the speech has been written or language is being used, though it is being used. But this is at the level where we discuss ideas. So there is a lot of brainstorming that goes into developing ideas, discussions with other people, with peers, or with seniors, right? That is the first thing that students need to know. Also, ideas can be developed in two ways. So there can be a flow of ideas when somebody is writing, let's say, jotting down their points that, as part of my speech, I'm going to say this. As part of my speech, I'm going to say something else, right? So there can be a flow of ideas. There can also be something which is known as field mapping. Field mapping is not a flow. Field mapping is a very strategic use of information, right? It is more like visually we say when we create a flow chart or when we create a diagram, when we classify things, right? Field mapping functions like that. But except that it is not being done on paper, it's being done mentally. So let's say a student, when we ask a student to prepare, a speech on a particular topic, we can either ask them to write, as form of a draft, the ideas that come to their mind, or we can ask them to specifically skim and scan for information, look for information that is pertinent or relevant to that topic, and write those ideas down, right? Okay. And these ideas can be sourced from multiple spaces. Like they can be taken normally as part of a speech. Normally, the ideas are taken from academic writings, and then they are made more accessible and written in a simpler language. That is one way of taking the ideas. The other is we can take them from the internet, from official records or sources, right? The level of ideation also includes what is known as, the phonological, the lexical, and the grammatical aspects. And what do we mean by this? We mean that at the level of ideas, students should be made aware of the fact that what kind of words are they using? You know, even when they are, let's say, preparing a draft or writing something, what kind of a grammar are they using? This is something that we as teachers come across very often. When we check student assignments, their classwork, their homework, often students nowadays tend to use abbreviations, short forms. So that kind of writing, even at the level of ideation, uh, should sort of be avoided, right? Uh, then the use of proper grammar, right? Even if you're jotting down some particular aspects only, right? And most importantly, when we speak to a large audience, right? It can be, speaking as part of a meeting, as part of a school gathering, as part of a competition, or it can be even at a global level where we are engaging in a TED talk, right? We need to be very careful about our pronunciation. So when students are at the just at the basic minimum level of drafting their ideas, they need to be very sure of what kinds of words are they using, and are they aware of their pronunciation? Have they heard those words before? Are those words a part of their active vocabulary? Or are they like, I've just heard this word, I really don't know what that word means, but they need to be sure about it. So at the level of ideation, we focus on how ideas can be developed, but we also focus upon pronunciation, and we also focus upon grammar. Then we come to the proper level of language. And here there are multiple aspects that can be used, multiple strategies that can be used for helping our learners to, become very good public speakers. So the first thing is, obviously a talk has to be thematically oriented. It has to be focused on a particular theme. There can be sub themes, but there has to be a larger single theme according to which the talk is organized. Then there is something that we as academicians use. It is known as a AWL, academic word list. It is freely available now. It was developed by an Australian academician, you know, uh, for researchers and for undergraduate students to actually write their assignments and to use proper academic words while writing those assignments. And the words are arranged alphabetically in this list, and the words are not very tough, at least for students, from, let's say, from class ninth to class 12th, right? Maybe for younger learners, the meanings have to be explained, but for students from grade 9 to grade 12th, yes, many of the words will sound familiar. So it is always advisable for teachers and for students to make use of the academic word list, right? In teaching and also in helping them to develop their public speeches. Then while the students are speaking, these are some aspects that come from language theory, particularly from, Brown and Levinson's notion of politeness, where they developed an entire theory on how people talk to each other as part of interaction, and they're polite with each other. And these aspects, by and large, should be used by the learners who are engaging in public speaking. So the first is seeking common ground with the audience. Common ground means uh, we need to speak in such a way. We need to narrate our information or choose to narrate those aspects of the information that are relatable for the audience. And those aspects will come first, right? Because if there is familiarity, if there is this quotient of relatability, the audience will pay attention. So that is the first aspect. The second aspect is the use of hedging. Now, the use of hedging here means toning down our stance if the stance is extremely assertive, if it's extremely direct. Because as public speakers, we need to understand what the audience truly wants to listen to. What are they there for, right? So we cannot use language that is very, very harsh. We cannot use language that is very, very assertive, very, very blunt. So hedging by and large means toning down. So using words like, let's say, it seems, it might be, it could be, there is a possibility, instead of saying that this is the case, right? Learners can also use assertive language, right? Only when it is backed by facts and figures, and that too official facts and figures, right? When it comes from a proper authentic source. The third aspect is the use of questions. So this is something that is often seen in a TED talk, and actually it becomes very helpful when the speaker, within the first 5 minutes or within the first 3 minutes of their speaking, asks a couple of questions to the audience. And by way of asking those questions, now the speaker speaks, and their remaining speech is an answer to those questions, right? So the questions act as a kind of a bait for getting the attention of the audience, right? Another aspect which is very clearly seen and in public speaking, and which creates a sense of solidarity, is the use of pronouns. In the technical term in linguistics is DXs, personal DXs. So when a speaker uses words like, I or you or we, right? There is, the speaker is actually trying to create a sense of belongingness with the audience, that, I share this issue with you, I understand that this is what you feel, and this is how we are going to solve it, right? Or this is a probable solution for it, right? There are very high chances when a speaker tries to create solidarity that the speaker has caught the attention of the audience. And obviously, their speech is going to be successful, right? Two other aspects that are very relevant for developing the aspect of language per se is, for a TED talk is avoiding the use of hasty generalizations. So, hasty generalizations are using sentences or using words that, involve polar phrases like this has never happened, or this will never happen, or everyone is like this, right? Uh, or this always happens. You know, using this kind of polarization, you know, using extremes in language is not advisable for public speaking. So we tend to avoid these words and phrases, right, in our speeches. And there are cases where a TEDx speaker, let's say, you know, might use words that are high sounding or that might, be a part of technical jargon. Um, in that case, those words have to be, the meanings of those words have to be explained. They have to be interwoven as part of their speech, right? So one way is to avoid the technical jargon completely. But the other is if the speaker wants to get in technical jargon, then that jargon has to be simplified and it has to be explained. There are some more linguistic strategies. Um, for example, you know, a speaker, right, or a student, let's say, in our case, a student has more chances of being selected if they have, created a kind of a digital profile or where they are focusing on their academic achievements, their extracurricular achievements, or the kind of work that they have done digitally, right? That is one way of doing it. Uh, Again, it involves both verbal language and it involves visuals. Another strategy is, like I'd mentioned, if the speaker uses facts and figures, right? The sources have to be authoritative. And here, what do we mean by sources? We mean that the data that the speaker cites has to be taken from official records. It needs to be taken from academic scholars, from academic websites. For example, right at the beginning, I talked about a survey done by Harvard Business Review. Now, we all know that the Harvard Business Review, right, is highly prestigious. And when they are stressing upon something, they have a global reach, they have a global audience. So when they are emphasizing something or stressing upon something, very high chances that uh, people will look up and take notice of what HBR is saying, right? So using authoritative sources for our data. Then, as part of the talk, as part of the TED talk, it's extremely important to use communication startups. This is something that we as teachers also do when we go to our classrooms, right? Especially, let's say, if it's after break time, when students have played a lot or they've had their tiffins and they are not really in a mood to study. We do tend to ask them questions. We do tend to engage in some kind of, normal conversation for a few minutes. We might even narrate some anecdotes, something that had happened to us, or something that we had heard about, right? Right. In TED Talks, anecdotal evidence becomes very, very important, right? It kind of strikes a chord with the audience. And many speakers also tend to talk about their personal challenges, the issues that they faced as part of research, right? There are TED Talks, for example, by sociolinguists, scholars who work in the area of language and society. They're trying to understand how different languages work. They're trying to understand how speakers of different languages interact with each other. And as part of their TED talk, they avoid the jargon or they explain the technical jargon that they're using, but they also talk about the problems and difficulties that they faced in their research and how they overcame those challenges. So this brings in an element of personalization, right? It does not, the idea in public speaking, let's say, particularly in a TED talk, is uh, creating relatability, creating familiarity. And that can happen when we say that, like you all in the audience, we have also faced challenges and we've also sort of dealt with them. And this is how we dealt with them. And this is the information that we're sharing. So communication startups become extremely important to break the ice. Another strategy is focusing on cultural competence. That is, we need to be careful about, what our target audience is, what are their social norms, what are their cultural practices, what are their customs, what is acceptable in that culture, what is not acceptable in that culture, right? Because if we are not careful about this, if we are not mindful of, the audience and their cultures and their practices, right? There can be a situation where we might say something which does not go down very well with the audience, something which they do not find very favorable or acceptable, right? Right? And that would directly impinge upon our image as a speaker. So this is something that students need to be made aware of, right? That when they're choosing a topic, when they're choosing speaking on a particular theme, right? They need to be aware of the context, the cultural context in which they are situating their talk, right? There are two more aspects that overlap with language and with psychology, right? And this is active listening and reflective thinking in listening. Now, in simple language, we say that active listening is when we are talking to somebody and then they respond and we listen to them with full attention, right? Okay. Reflective listening or thinking is a little different. This is when we give, in obviously, again, in simple language, we say when we give food for thought to the listener, that is reflective thinking, right? And listening. So when we share ideas with them, right, which are simple yet groundbreaking, okay, ideas that sort of defamiliarize a concept, right, where the listener is made to think, oh, I didn't think about it this way. Oh, I didn't know that this could be done this way, right? So when we share ideas with our listeners, right, that are extremely important, let's say, for their academic work or for their day-to-day life, right? And they are sort of compelled to think about it, to reflect on it. That becomes reflective thinking, right? And this normally happens as part of public speeches. Specifically, it can be school speeches or again TED talks. This particularly happens when the speaker is on stage, when they are speaking, but they are also focusing on the audience by way of eye contact, by way of understanding how they are appearing, how they are responding, right? So it is a two-way process that is continuously going, or I should say a multi-way process that is continuously going on, right? When they are speaking, right? Because it's a response to how the audience is, the speaker's speech is a response to how the audience is responding to them. Now we move on to the psychological strategies, and here there are 4 or 5 tools, you could say, that are extremely important. First, there needs to be a lot of focus on non-verbal communication, or what is commonly known as body language. And we need to tell our students that when they engage in public speaking, they need to follow this principle of the golden mean, which is, let's say, for example, there are some speakers who engage in a lot of gesticulations, using their hands a lot when they speak. Now, excessive use of the hands is not good because it distracts the audience from the content. Similarly, too much movement, right, while speaking is again a distraction for the audience, right? But this does not mean that the speaker cannot use their hands at all. Also, this does not mean that the speaker should not walk on stage, right? Maybe they can walk a few steps and pause, continue with their explanation, right? Maybe they can walk a few steps back then, right? So, judicious use of the body language, right? Okay. Also, eye contact. For example, this is something that some of our students, need to be aware about. Uh, there might be students who are a little nervous. They are very good speakers. They have the fluency and the proficiency in the language to express themselves, but they're suffering from stage fright. They're nervous, right? So normally we say as part of, maintaining non-verbal communication that the speaker should maintain eye contact. But in case of students who are a little nervous, right, we tell them that instead of maintaining eye contact with the entire audience, that is moving their eyes from one end to the other end, which might make them nervous, we might ask them to focus on some people, right, for the time being, right, to practice in front of the mirror, let's say, by speaking aloud, right? So all these aspects are practical that become part of non-verbal communication. Okay. Then our students also need to be aware of back channel support. Back channel support is again a technical term in linguistics, and it means the kind of feedback or response we get on our speeches, specifically on our public speaking, right? Okay. How are people responding? Are they smiling? Are they nodding? What are they doing? Are they shifting? Are they scrolling their phones? Right? Okay, is their head down? Right? Looking at their body language, we can understand whether our talk, whether our information is actually getting through, or are they just getting bored, or are they just disinterested, right? Normally good back channel support would mean responses through, let's say, through nodding, through smiling, right? It would also mean understanding, let's say, using words like yes, mm-hmm, these are discourse fillers, right? So our students need to be made aware of this. Also, apart from this, pure psychological aspects like the work on emotional intelligence was done by Daniel Goleman, right? And you know, having an emotional quotient (EQ) tells us to be able to become aware of our emotions, to recognize them, and then to use them effectively, right? So we need to have the emotional intelligence. We here means the speakers who are speaking, right? To be able to express particular emotions to the audience via their speech so that those emotions create a particular effect on the audience, right? So let's say explaining some kind of an anecdote, right, where they faced a problem, okay, creates creates the emotion of, or arouses or elicits the emotion of anxiety or maybe disappointment, right? But when the speaker explains the ways in which they dealt with it and how they overcame that kind of emotion or that kind of a problem, right? There is an emotional shift from a negative emotion, a negative affect, to a positive one, right? So, emotional intelligence also includes understanding how the audience will react. It also includes channelizing or using particular kinds of emotions to create a particular effect. Needless to say, like I've been mentioning, we need to be aware of audience psychology. But a very important fact is when learners our students or our learners are training to become public speakers and they are practicing, they constantly need to be reflexive. Reflexive here means what? that there is, when we talk about reflexivity, we talk about a kind of a movement from, uh, their ideas to the strategies that they are using, to the content that they are actually writing and framing down in words, right? And to go back and forth with it, to pause and to reflect on what they are wanting to say. Are they, what they are wanting to say, is it actually being conveyed on paper, right? Because learners might have an idea of, this is what I want to say. But ultimately, what they write, the speech that they write, what they practice in terms of their public speaking might be a little different from that. So they need to be reflexive. They need to pause. They need to always check that this is what I wanted to do. These were my goals. Am I able to fulfill that through my speech? Right? Am I able to create that kind of an impact, right, on the audience? Am I able to get my points across to the audience? So that is reflexivity. Moving on, there are two more aspects that I'd like to discuss. First is the difference between sort of a formal speech that we come across, that our students would probably make use of as part of competitions, and this versus a TED talk, and then actually understanding all the strategies that I've talked about in terms of a sample TED talk. So here we see, this is what we see, that, in a formal speech, the aim of a formal speech is very different. It's to sort of give information, but a TED talk is always inspirational. The audience will also vary, because in a TED talk, the audience is going to be global. Even though the delivery of their speech, the way a person speaks is going to be conversational. It's not going to be very formal and didactic, right? And there is a lot of use of storytelling. There is a lot of personalization. There is a lot of visuals that are used, unlike, let's say, in a formal speech, right? Even the beginning and end of TED talk is different from, let's say, a formal speech, right? Because in formal speaking and writing, we can make use of quotations, things that have been discussed by famous people. Okay. But in a TED talk, we tend to make use of something which is known as a hook, right? That I've discussed earlier: anecdotal evidence, asking questions, relating a personal story, or something like that. And most importantly, we end a TED talk with reflective thinking, you know, giving information for the or to the audience to think upon, right? And the information can be simple, but it can be extraordinary in terms of its content, right? This is the typical structure of a TED talk. Um, so the aspects discussed here might, uh, the sequential order might vary a little. Why? Because every TED speaker, we need to know, has a unique way of narrating, a unique way of speaking, right? So let's say if I have written that a TED talk opens with a hook, let's say an anecdote or a question, not necessarily so. Sometimes it might open with an emotional connect that the speaker is trying to create with the audience. It might open with a personal story, right? Or an issue that the speaker faced, right? It involves expert tips, it involves expert insights. Uh, it might make use of jargon. Mostly jargon is avoided, but if it does, the jargon is explained. Uh, then there is the analysis of what the speaker did to deal with that kind of a problem, right? And finally, there is a reflection on, what to take away from the talk. So a TED talk, we can say, in terms of, let's say, there is a linguist called Michael Hoy, right? He says that when we look at the discourse of a TED talk, we can say it is more like a problem solution pattern, where the speaker poses a problem to the audience, right? Discusses some kind of personal information, or some aspect of their lives, or something that they have heard or read or encountered personally, and how that sort of helps them to reflect upon the problem, okay? And the strategies that they use to overcome that problem, to deal with that problem, right? So it has a sort of a problem solution structure. That is the overarching, you can say, thematic pattern of a TED talk, right? And to end with, I will now discuss a sample TED talk. Now, there are multiple TED talks that are available, right? The one that I've chosen is it actually has 1.7 million views, right? It's there on YouTube, but that's been uploaded by TED. And it's by this speaker, Mariana Pascal. And the topic of the talk is learning a language, learn to speak like a pro, you know, like a child, let's say a person plays a video game, right? And these are some of the aspects of the talk.
Hello,
So,
Soumya, ma'am, excuse me.
yes, yes.
Ma'am, if we can conclude, then we'll go for questions. I mean,
Yes,
if
sure.
you can
Just 2 minutes. I'm just
summarize,
concluding.
please.
Yes, I'm
Please.
just concluding.
No.
Yes, sure.
Okay.
Yes. So this is the hook on the connect that Pascal makes with the audience. She says that, you know, as part of being a trainer and helping Malaysians and many South Asians to speak English, right? This is something that she has discovered as the truth, right? That becomes a hook because the audience is now waiting to listen to what is there. What is she going to say further? And then she pauses, rhythmically pauses in her speech, and she says that, you know, I discovered that there are people who do not have very high frequency in English, but they can communicate very well. And then she narrates a personal anecdote of how one of her student, who is a factory supervisor, he belongs to this category. And she poses a question of why it's important to learn a language and to learn it without judgment, to learn it without, you know, being consciously aware of it. So she poses a question. She also engages in this kind of reflective thinking. And then there is this kind of analysis where she compares and talks about her challenges. Let's say, you know, how a speaker with low proficiency in English is learning how to speak. And she compares that with her daughter, who dreads learning piano, right? So she's making use of particular emotions. Then she gives multiple examples of these children who are playing in video games in the cyber cafe, how she meets a doctor who, despite not being very proficient in English, still, you know, gives her a very good diagnosis and things like that, right? And finally, she makes use of tables and charts to explain. The crux of her argument is just this, that 96% of the people, this is far from Pascal's talk, are non-native speakers of English. And the concluding remarks of Pascal are that when we do not focus on, you know, what other people think of us, how other people are going to judge us when we speak English, we will be able to learn the language much better. So the whole gist is her concluding remarks are focusing on development, focusing on developing confidence, right? Not being conscious of what we are saying, focusing on the speaker or on the listener, getting the communication done instead of thinking, you know, how the other person is going to judge me, right? This is a small example of a TED talk. Thank you. These are my references.
Ma'am, thank you. And before we end today's session, and there are a few questions asked
Yeah.
in the chat box and also in the question and answer section.
Yes.
I think very few students also have joined. So
Right.
some of the questions are also from the students. So, ma'am, how can I remove stage fear?
Yes. So, stage fear, like I mentioned, there are two ways of doing it, right? One, I mentioned in the talk itself, that instead of having eye contact with, you know, let's say a sweep across with the larger audience, it's better to focus on some people at one point of time, right? Also practicing in front of a mirror, speaking aloud and practicing in front of a mirror, right?
Yeah,
Practicing our speech, whatever our draft we've written. That is one. Second one.
right. And Sanjana has asked how to ask questions for the audience. Means the voice range. I didn't get the question, but I think it's largely
Even,
about how to ask questions for the audience. I think the question is from that perspective, like TEDx has a very set time. Let's say if it is a 5 to 6 minutes talk, so asking questions could take a lot of time. So how to ask, it seems, I think.
Okay, so we don't need to ask questions in that sense. If there is if there is a set format and if they have a time limit, it's out of all the questions, this can be a suggestion that I'm giving, that out of all the questions that we frame as part of our draft, we should choose just one important question, right? If there is a time limit, and just pose that, and then continue with our
Yes.
what we are speaking, right? Okay. If
Uh,
no scope, then maybe two questions. Otherwise, one very important pertinent question will do.
yeah,
What
a
is
very
back channel?
pertinent question. Yes.
What is, it's not black, I'm sorry, ma'am. It is back channel support. Back channel, like we understand channel, communication is a sort of a channel, two-way channel between people. But actually, it's more than a two-way channel. So back channel means how the person's respond. What is the person responding? What are they saying? What are they doing verbally and non-verbally? And how is that affecting the speaker, right? Something that our students continuously do with us in classrooms, how they respond and or how they do not respond also determines the way we teach in the classroom.
Yes, and how to share our facial expressions.
How to share facial expressions in a TED-Ed, all most of the TED-Ed talks that I've noticed, they have these huge screens, right? Okay, so we the facial expressions actually should match our emotional content, right? That is the best strategy possible. So if you're talking about a challenge, a personal issue, a difficulty that we overcome, it's always it's always good to be sober and direct, right? But if we are cracking a joke or if we are saying something, it's always good to smile, right? So the emotion should match the facial expression.
Yeah,
I'm habituated.
and there is a big question, but I think it's more about uh, recalling. I think, ma'am, yes. So
Yes. So I'm
Tejaswini, ma'am, I think.
hmm.
Though I'm habituated with speech debates and anchoring, I think it's from a
Okay.
teacher from my school days till date.
Yes.
But at times I face challenges in presentation strategies and flows. Later, I recall that something better could have been done. In teaching communication skills to students of class 3, 4, I face
Okay.
some challenges. Yes.
Yes, yes. So, with young learners, uh, PPTs can be helpful, yes, but they're not very helpful, ma'am. The most important thing with young learners is using visuals and using our own face, our facial expressions, something that I just answered. That is very, very important for young learners, right? Repetition is very important for young learners, repeating the same thing in different ways, right? Okay. A lot of encouragement, something that we say in psychology, it's known as positive psychology. A lot of encouragement for the learners, right? Because many of the young learners are they're not always very obedient. Sometimes they can be mischievous. Sometimes they might not listen to the teacher. So use of positive psychology, encouraging them, right? Repeating concepts, using visuals. All this really helps young learners.
Yes, and I'm avoiding some of the repetitive questions, and I'll take
Yes.
there are some questions in the chat. So
There is one,
one,
sir. There is one here which says, what if we are stuck in a topic?
yes,
Yes. So the thing is, when we are stuck in a topic, particularly, there are two things. So from the point of view of a teacher, if we are stuck in a topic, please use examples, anecdotes, right? Because the student might not understand the concept theoretically, but they will understand it through anecdotal evidence. Secondly, if it is for a student who is engaging in public speaking, right? Uh, if they get stuck, right? Again, use examples or quickly move on to the point which is coming to their mind, right? Because nobody, please note, the script is in our head. Nobody else knows that this is the script, right? So it's better to move on to the next point and explain that properly, right?
yes, and that holds this answer for the other question when we forget what we do. Yes, and another question I find it interesting is, can I use mother tongue or Telugu if I am stuck or if I want to use an
Yes,
anecdote?
yes, completely, completely. Yes, right. In fact, according to the national education policy, the new one, there is a lot of focus on multilingualism. We should. Why not? Right?
Hmm.
Because we cannot say that, like I'll just to give a small example again from, Mariana Pascal, the sample that I had taken, of that TED talk. She says very clearly, when she's talking about that doctor, she has an appointment with him. The
Uh,
doctor does not know English very properly, right? Still, the
yes.
communication happens. Why? Because
Yeah.
it's basic communication. The doctor is focused on solving Pascal's problem, right?
Yes.
Whatever it might be, right?
Oh,
Even though,
but
even if you listen to the talk, Pascal actually creates a humorous situation by talking about that example, right? So what is stopping us from using our own languages? We should. Okay,
so
English is an important language, but other
got it.
languages, all our
Yes.
languages are
Yes.
more important.
Yes, ma'am. But I mean, this state level competition is being organized to encourage the English language skills. Could be, yeah.
Okay, so if the
Except that, in
competition is
general,
being
I
used,
think,
all
yes,
right.
got it.
Yes,
Got it.
yes, yes,
Sampath sir has
obviously.
also responded. Thank
Yeah,
you,
yeah.
Sampath, for
Yes,
adding. Yes.
yes,
Yes.
yes. That goes without saying. I
Yes.
thought, the question was based only
And we
on classroom
understand.
teaching. So I was explaining from that point of view. But if the
We understand.
competition is in English, yes, then training needs to be done in that language.
Yes. Yes, ma'am. And
For district level
okay.
students, this is a question which is suitable for students, formal speech or TED Ed.
How to, ma'am,
Uh,
one question, how to reduce rushness while a talk show or reduce speed?
how to reduce
That speedness, when someone,
speed in
someone
communication. Okay,
yeah,
speed in communication is very simple. Speed in communication is we all have stopwatches. This is a practical tip. We all have stopwatches in on our phones, right? So use a stopwatch and time your speech. 10 seconds, 15 seconds, 20 seconds. Okay. Time how you're speaking. Are you speaking too fast? Are you speaking too many words per second? If you can reduce the words per second, the problem automatically gets solved.
yeah. Yes,
Ma'am,
ma'am.
yes, there's another one, ma'am. Okay.
Oh, I think these are repetitive, ma'am. Will there be a question and answer session after my speech? Yes.
There is one question where a speaker is asking that as part of flow and talk, do we pause? Yes, it's good to pause for 1 or 2 seconds, right? Especially if we are talking or, giving some very important information. It's good to pause and it's good to repeat that point again, right?
All right. Uh, Ma'am, thank you. And I think a lot of questions seem to be similar, and one new message.
Are
So
there
one
any other?
again we are a question. Uh, with your own talking with your own conceptual knowledge is good, or preparation is better to talk?
I would say, ma'am, conceptual knowledge is good, very good, but preparation is also required here. So, but the most important thing, conceptual knowledge has to be supplemented with examples, right? So, for that, a little bit of preparation is required, right? Um, because learners always learn better. Even as public speakers, we tend to speak better. The audience tends to understand better if we give examples. Both
Uh,
aspects are relevant.
and Sampath sir, welcome you. You would love to listen if you would like to add something here. And ma'am,
And
we have, yes,
yeah,
yes,
well,
sir.
thank you, Soumya ma'am, and all the great teachers and students of this session. And here, ma'am has given clear instructions like how to prepare for that TED talk, and it's very nice, ma'am. The children will make use of this session, and they will prepare well for their competition. Thank you. This is my side, and all the very best for all the children. So thank you, Pranit.
Thank you so much, sir. And Vinay Dharal, sir, over to you, sir.
Hello. Good evening, all
Yes,
of
sir.
you.
Good evening, sir.
Thank you for joining us, Soumya ma'am. And really, it is very useful and very reflective session for the teachers. And most of the students are also very interested. They ask a lot of questions. This is really very engaging session for all of us. And thank you for collaborating
Thank you,
with
sir.
us, and thank you for giving this valuable webinar for us. And I
Thank you,
also
sir.
thank the Bharati Foundation for making an arrangements for the taking time and inviting and creating the Zoom link and all other things. And good luck for all the students and the teachers for the coming district level competitions. Thank you all.
Thank you so much, sir. Okay, and with just one or two concluding words, we will end the session. And we have discussed a lot on how effective communication works through linguistic strategies, psychological strategies, and how important it is to understand the audience psychology also. And Soumya ma'am, you have also highlighted the key differences between formal speech and a TED talk, and how showing how personalization and storytelling make communication impactful. And
Hmm.
this has given us practical insights to communicate with clarity, confidence, and purpose. And we thank you for your time, ma'am. And one thing very interesting here is I mean, I was a little afraid of what kind of questions and do we get questions or not. But we got very, very interesting questions. And the
Yes,
discussion
we're
is,
still getting
uh,
questions, sir.
yeah,
I'm
yes,
just
yes.
looking at the chat.
Yes, yes. So still we are getting questions, and okay, we will note down these and we'll try to answer in uh, as many ways as possible. Try to reach out to all the students and teachers participating in these competitions. So
Hmm.
thank you, Soumya ma'am, for your time, and thank you, Elta, and thank you, dear all teachers and students, for taking time out and spending good time to learn in the evenings. Thank you, everyone.